scary similar body type, scary similar athleticism, scary similar game, but Aaron Donald, kind of a tweener coming out, he's proven to be the ultimate exception to that rule.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Harmon is the dude for receivers, and like he charts every route every receiver runs in the NFL like every week. Like he's a freakazoid. And Paul, I guess Harmon's the kind of guy that's above our, like I could reach out to him, but that'd be above our weight class. He got him on there, and dude went through everybody in this class as well as talking about Burks and Phillips.
Mm-hmm.
It was very informative. I learned some things. All right, I've hit record. Let's do it. You ready? Here we go. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast for Monday, April the 10th. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network, and I am joined on this Monday morning by my buddy, my producer, JT. JT, how are you, man? How was your weekend?
It was good. Did a lot of work, just kind of chilled out and enjoyed the half good weather, half bad weather here in Nashville, but you know, it was all good.
Yep. Yeah, it definitely was a mixed bag weather-wise. We're recording this, of course, on Sunday night, so happy Easter to you and to everybody. Hope you had a good Easter with friends and family yesterday. This is my favorite time of the year, JT. Do you know why this time of year rocks? It's not my favorite, but it's one of them.
I have a few guesses. I wonder why.
Guess away. I want to hear. What are your guesses?
Maybe the Masters.
No, that's one of that. I mean, I like the Masters, but that's not why.
Then I don't know the weather. I don't know.
Nah, man, it's tax season, baby. Woo! File your taxes, boys and girls. Yeah, I realized that when I was getting ready for this episode. Like, oh, cool. Next Tuesday, taxes are due. So here's your friendly neighborhood Hot Read podcast reminding you that if you've not filed your taxes yet, you should probably do that this week. We are also just 17 days away, where I guess as of Monday, we'll be 8 days away from tax season or taxes being due. We are 17 days away from the first round of the NFL draft. And that is not a lot of time, JT, especially when you're like you and I, who have been sitting on a handful of content creation ideas for like the last 3 months that we've saved. Oh, we want to do that when we get close to the draft. When we get close to the draft, when people care about these things, you know, close to the draft. And guess what? We're here. I think within 3 weeks, that's really when people start to, I don't know. I've been trying to gauge based on the riff-raff on social media, JT. Like, when does the average fan really start to care about the draft? It feels like this is the week where that starts. Is that kind of the feel that you have?
Yeah, I think so.
We're 2.5 weeks away. People are starting to talk about these guys.
It's where the mock drafts start getting, you know, people start kind of putting their final pieces into place, stop kind of being kind of sexy with it. It's kind of like, this is what I think is going to happen. And then we'll move on from there. Yeah.
We get down to brass tacks. You know, baseball spring training is over. Opening day is behind us. So we're kind of in the lull of the very beginning of the MLB season. NBA season, regular season is coming to a close. NHL regular season is coming to a close. So it's kind of, in the general sports world, the Masters is over. So people in the golf world are starting to look towards the next major in a month or so. This is the lull where I think people start to turn their heads back towards the NFL. We're 2.5 weeks away. And with just 17 days left before that first round pick, JT, you and I have been hard at work this weekend behind the scenes, getting together our schedule content, trying to map out our plans for the next 2.5 weeks. All the guests we're going to have on in the next 2.5 weeks. We already have like 4 or 5 different folks that some of which have never been on the show already confirmed. I've got 5 or 6 more that I'm trying to confirm this week that we may or may not get. So like super jazzed. Pretty soon we're going to have a different guest on every other show or every show. We also have way more shows planned for the next 3 weeks than we typically have running. Obviously we were twice a week during the regular season last year. We were doing Monday and Friday mornings. We've moved to Monday, Wednesday, Friday mornings for the free agency period the last month or so. We are now, JT, moving to 5 or more days a week of content for the next 3 weeks. So not going to release all the details on that yet. We're actually going to have a little bit more than a show every single work week day for the next 3 weeks. But generally speaking, every weekday we will have a new show. This week we've got 5 new shows coming out, and this is the first of 14 episodes that we have planned and are going. Like, this is not a, we might get to, no, we've got them booked up, planned out. They're happening. There's 14 of them. We've got 5 today. Can you imagine? 5 this week. So I ran the numbers, and that's not a lot of time, and that's a lot of shows. So we're getting down to brass tacks here. Obviously, as you've been following along with us, you know, based on the title of this podcast, this is the 3rd positional episode we've done, JT? All right. We covered linebackers. We covered safeties. We are now on to defensive tackles. That's the main topic of today's show. JT and I have brought our defensive tackle big boards to show and tell today. We're going to go through our top 10 guys, compare, contrast, debate. Hopefully you and we can learn a little bit about these very top interior defender prospects in this year's draft from today's episode. We also have some other things to get to at the top here. So we'll spend the first couple minutes talking about those things. Just a little free agency season roundup, some news that came down, Jeffery Simmons being the biggest amongst Titans news. We'll get to that in just a minute. I have to address the Masters because this is a sports show. It is the offseason. JT, you were held at your other job today against your will, forced to watch more golf than I'm sure you ever intended to. And I'm a big golf guy. I love to play golf. I love to watch golf. And so if nothing else but to frustrate you, JT, I'm going to bring it up. How about the Masters? Great tournament. Loved it. I had like 19 thoughts on this that I tweeted throughout the day. I know that JT was not a big fan of that. He was making fun of me for,
I wasn't a big fan of it because after I got off, got home from work, I opened my phone and I swear to God, Twitter gave me 8 Easton Master tweets in a row. They were in a row, and I was like, oh, "Come on, man!" This
wasn't like me retweeting other accounts.
No, this was all hashtag
original thoughts, baby.
Just a bunch of them. I couldn't take it.
I don't know what to tell you. I'm on a golf account now. That's as of this weekend. I'm a golf account. I don't really care about the NFL. Wake me when the regular season starts. No, I thought it was a very entertaining tournament, especially Sunday. Very up and down. JT, I know that you weren't paying attention to the tournament super well, but you were here in town. You knew that the weather on Saturday here was miserable, cold and wet. It was even worse in Augusta. And so for the 2 middle days of the tournament, Friday and Saturday, the scheduling got all out of whack because of the weather, threatened to ruin what was a great tournament. And I cannot tell you how bad I felt for those patrons. Because if you know anything about the Masters, you know it's a lottery ticket system. So unless you are like from around the area or one of the very few very wealthy people that are a member there, you have to just submit your name, 1 submission per household every year to win a chance to buy Masters tickets. And so you do it. Oh, like for example, my dad, who is the guy who instilled the love of golf in me, as long as I've been alive, so at least the past 23 years, he's put in for our family household. He's done it for both of my grandparents and many of our aunts and uncles to try to maximize his odds. Very smart. And yet in the last 23 years, he's gotten tickets 1 time. And I got to go with him in 2015 to a practice round, which was amazing. If you get a chance to go ever, you can't cancel the birth of your child, your wedding, whatever it is, go. If I got tickets after trying for a decade and then got there on this Saturday, not even tickets. Like a lot of times you get like we went to a practice round on a Wednesday to get tickets for the actual tournament days, the weekend days, impossible. On Saturday and Sunday, it's mostly ticket holders that are year-to-year guys. If you got Saturday tickets after 10 years of trying and then got there, the most beautiful place on earth, supposed to be a little slice of heaven in the backwoods of Georgia, and it's freezing rain and the tournament gets cut in half and you have to just go home.
Trees falling on
people. JT, I would commit a war crime. You would have to try me before the Hague because I would lose my mind and probably hurt many people and things around me before I jumped off of a roof or into a lake somewhere. But the tournament was fine on Sunday. The weather got really nice. And then John Rahm, the big Spaniard, just did it to him, man. He basically just spotted the entire field a 2-stroke lead after he 4-putted on the first green on the first hole of the tournament. and then still ended up waxing everybody, winning by 4 strokes. Very impressive performance. He was due. A lot of live narratives going on with some big live guy. How about the lefty getting up there solo second? Or maybe he may have a tie with second with his fellow live member, Brooks Koepka, but Phil Mickelson playing like electric Phil. Love to see that. He's so fun to watch. It's impossible not to root for him. But yeah, that's the Masters. Very cool. I guess the only NFL tie-in, JT, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, but in his speech, his award acceptance speech, I guess, on the 18th green in front of all of the patrons and all the former winners and all of the people, all the players in the field, Jon Rahm was saying apparently he's really good friends with Zach Ertz, tight end for the Cardinals. And he said that right before he was going to tee off on Thursday for the first round of the tournament, he was driving on a golf cart to the practice green 10 minutes before his tee time to go get some last minute putts in. And Zach Ertz, in a group chat he's in, apparently it's him and Zach Ertz and JJ Watt. I don't know why they're in a group chat together, but they are a Spanish golf pro, and then 2, a former Cardinal and a current Cardinal. But they're in a group chat. Zach Ertz texts in that group chat and says, like, John, you're going to kill it. And then said something along the lines of, that first green is looking like a slice of cake, looking like a walk in the park. And he joked, he told me that 10 minutes before I went to then 4-putt double the first hole of the tournament and make a mockery of that green. So he said he almost cost him a green jacket. Maybe that means Zach Ertz gets a green jacket now that he was a coach. He helped, obviously. That's enough golf talk today, JT. Let's move on to our free agency roundup. No warm up for us today. We've got a lot to get to, so I'm going to save some thoughts for another show. Let's get into the couple of tidbits we have to talk about in the roundup before we talk about defensive tackles. And JT, the first thing we have to talk about is Jeffery Simmons is going to remain a Titan for the foreseeable future. How about that?
He definitely is. The Titans and Jeffery Simmons agreed on a term to a deal earlier this past weekend. It's a 4-year extension worth $94 million. That's about $23.5 million per year based on the new money, in which Simmons is going to get $66 million guaranteed, which includes a $24 million signing bonus. And he's under contract for $104.75 million over 5 years.
Yeah, the tough scene for the Amy Adams Strunk is too poor to pay her players crowd. If she's poor, I would like to volunteer to sign up to be poor. Please and thank you. Good for Jeffery Simmons, first of all. Also good for us who have been saying for as long as I can remember us being on this show this year that Jeffery Simmons is going to remain a Titan. We talked about it throughout the season. We talked about it when Rand Carthen was named the GM of the Titans. The basic thing that told me there's no chance he's not a Titan going forward is the logic that we've brought up countless times, JT. The new guy's not coming in and making the same mistake that it seems like the last guy got canned for. We know that John Robinson did a lot of things that caused him to ultimately get the boot, but public perception is oftentimes reality. You hear public perception is reality. When it's public perception in sports, that is even more true than normally is the case. And the people think, and I think that it was not the only reason, but it certainly was the straw that broke the camel's back. John Robinson trading away the gem of a franchise stud, bona fide top 10 receiver in the league player, AJ Brown, who the Titans, John Robinson drafted himself in the second round of the 2019 draft, traded him away. That was obviously a horrible trade. The Titans got fleeced by the Eagles. The Titans ended up drafting his replacement in Treylon Burks, who's by no means a failure. He's got a lot of work to do, but he's shown a lot of promise. He's not reached that potential just yet. But the new guy was not going to come in and be the moron that looked at that situation. The guy leaving the office, he's coming in and unboxing his stuff to put on the desk and say, "Oh, let me make my first major point of business doing the exact same thing that guy did to get fired with the other star player we found in the 2019 draft class." He wasn't going to do that, and he didn't. So congrats to Rand Carthen. Congrats to Jeffery Simmons. Congrats to Jeff's agent, Paul DeRozelle, who is a first-time agent, and it seems like this is I'm not big up on the history of agencies in the NFL, but I'd say this being your first deal is a pretty good start. So good for him. I reported, was it last week or the week before? It was roughly 8 or 9 days ago that I had a source in the league saying that the Titans had not reached a deal with Jeffery Simmons, there was no reason to believe that that was imminent. There were some folks trying to say that that report on my part was wrong. The part about it not being imminent was not super accurate. I was correct, obviously, that they hadn't reached a deal 8 or 9 days ago. I guess it depends on how you define the relative term imminent. And that was really just me not replying, but repeating the words that were communicated to me from my source. So if you consider that report on my part, that sourcing wrong, I'll tell you this. If that is wrong in your book, I can say that don't shoot the messenger, because that was what was reported to me. And could it have been a lie from this person? Totally. Yeah. Like it could have been. Could it have been that they just didn't know what they were talking about? I can say unequivocally with 100% certainty that is not the case. I'm not going to reveal who my source is, but I can tell you that based on their position and their proximity to the negotiations for this contract, I know without a shadow of a doubt that they know and knew what was going on up to the minute. And so if what they fed me was wrong, then it was just a little fib, I suppose. But I don't think it was all that wrong. I actually think, JT, that when they told me that 9 days ago, we don't have a deal and a deal is not imminent, I don't think it was imminent at that time. I think that something may have changed in the last 8 or 9 days. Again, maybe I got fibbed to by my source, totally possible. But if they weren't lying, and I know that they knew what they were talking about, then something must have changed in the last 8 days. Does that mean the Titans budged? Does that mean the Simmons camp budged? Does that mean the draft strategy of the Titans or the free agency strategy of the Titans changed and they decided that they could allocate more money to this situation? Does it mean that maybe Jeffery Simmons and his camp were sniffing around the free market, even though they're not on the free market, just trying to see what teams might be potentially willing to pay him, what his market value might be? And maybe they realized what they were asking for was a little bit more unrealistic than they had previously believed. Whatever the case is, and this is me, my opinion, this is not sourced, but it's my opinion that something changed in the last 8 days, because all of the vibes, all of the sourcing, everything that I'd heard from secondhand and firsthand sources about the situation up until we found out this past weekend that he'd been signed was, don't be surprised if this contract doesn't get inked until the summer. And I've been repeating that, and it turns out that's not the case. And listen, I could not be more happy to be wrong than in this instant, because for one, I'm so glad we don't have to talk about Jeffery Simmons. Will he or won't he be a Titan for the, until August, when we're trying to focus on training camp? That was going to get really old really fast. And also good for the Titans for learning from their past mistakes and hanging on to stud players. Jeffery Simmons is worth every penny of that contract. He deserves every penny. And the Titans, JT, you may disagree. Others may disagree. I think they got a great deal here. Genuinely, I do. This number, the details of this contract came in a good bit lower than I thought they would. I had put out a tweet that I didn't go find, but I thought it would, my guess for the contract, and I'm not the biggest contract expert in the city by any means, but my guess was it was going to be a 5-year, I think I said $132 million, roughly 26 average APY, $26 million a year on the contract, with something like a $90 million signing bonus. He ends up getting 4 years. Excuse me, I guess he has okay. So if you include the year that he's currently on, the last year of his rookie contract, the 5th-year option the Titans picked up, he's now under contract for the next 5 years, but his new contract term is for 4 years, roughly, what is it, 23.5 million APY. So well below. I thought that their starting asking price would be at least 25. And cap experts around the league, folks who I based my opinion on, thought that as well. So I think that Jeffery Simmons, we already had indication from him personally that he wanted to stay in Tennessee. He comes off as the kind of guy that is a player more interested in loyalty and the grind and sticking with your program and winning the right way and, dedication and family loyalty to your teammates. Like, that's kind of his vibe. He's not the chase the bag, willing to move around type, or at least he doesn't seem to be. I think that he and his camp gave the Titans a really nice deal. And so Rand Carthen, his first big deal for the Titans is getting Jeffery Simmons locked down. I think it's a big win for both sides. And I think that, I had one more thing I was going to say. Oh, I think that in 2 years, maybe sooner than that, but at the minimum 2 years, you're going to look at this contract in the context of the rest of the NFL, which it is a technically a market-setting contract. It is the most money APY for a defensive tackle in the league, not named Aaron Donald, who has APY in the 30s, this shorter contract. It's very warped and different. It's an albatross of a contract, not real. If you get that not real contract out of the way, Simmons is now the top guy by, I think, $500,000 average per year. And yet, 2 years from now, you're going to look at this contract and think, how in the world are the Titans only paying $23.5 million a year to Jeffery Simmons? How? It wouldn't shock me in the slightest if on his second deal, he'd be nearing 30 years old. It wouldn't shock me at all if he got around the same number or more, based on the fact that I think he's going to be a long-term stud. His prime's going to be longer than the average player. And I also think that based on the way that the salary cap's going to continue to shoot to the moon, the way that the position is being valued more and more year on year, I think that he's going to make a lot more money in the future, and the Titans got an awesome deal.
Let's move on to a more current signing that just happened today in OBJ. Finally,
we can quit talking about
finally
this.
Getting down to play with the Ravens. He was signed on a 1-year deal in which he will be getting $15 million guaranteed and can make almost $18 million on the year. So OBJ goes to be wide receiver 1 for maybe Lamar Jackson.
You're about to say,
who knows?
Hey, he'll have a Hall of Fame guy passing him the ball no matter what. I can tell you that. Or not Hall of Fame. I ruined the joke. A pro bowler throwing him the ball no matter what, whether it's Tyler Huntley or Lamar Jackson. Man, I was surprised by this. Not that he signed, but who he signed with. I didn't have the Ravens on my bingo card. I don't know about you. I didn't really know where he was going to go, but people weren't really talking about the Ravens as being the number one option until he signed. A couple of things about this. Peter Schrager tweeted this out shortly after the deal came out, knowing a bit about the ins and outs of the Odell talks, according to Peter, in the last few weeks with teams. I can't imagine he signed with Baltimore without at least a good feeling that Lamar Jackson would be under center throwing to him. Well, there's a pretty good indication. And I think logic would tell you, well, why would OBJ sign with the Ravens if he didn't have a good idea that Lamar Jackson's going to still be there? And then Odell Beckham Jr. tweeted out a couple of hours ago a picture of him and Lamar on FaceTime smiling and cutting up. It seems like that's where things are headed. And yet, you look at the terms of the deal, that's not a typo. $18 million for a guy that is coming off of his second consecutive ACL injury and hasn't played in over a year. It's a bold leap of faith financially from the Ravens organization. One that I think is an interesting choice. This is the same organization that looks at, how old is Lamar? 23, 24 years old, a former unanimous MVP, your star quarterback. And you're like, get out of here with these guaranteed contract demands. But then they look at a guy who's an aging wide receiver nearing 30 years old. Is he 30 yet? He might be around 30 years old, coming off of his second consecutive ACL injury. And they're like, let's throw $18 million 1-year contract at this guy. It's a choice. It's a choice, especially if you're not sure if that quarterback's going to be back. The fact that it was a almost $14 million signing bonus and only $3 million in incentives with a $1.1-ish million base salary, that's insane that they gave him that much guaranteed money. What it does tell you is that if another team in the league, while Lamar Jackson is still an unrestricted no, he's not a free agent at all. He is on the non-exclusive franchise tag. My brain is jumbled with offseason jargon right now. He's on the non-exclusive franchise tag. So while he is still eligible to talk to other teams, this makes it more possible if another team wanted to try to poach Lamar away from the Ravens, they could more easily poison pill the contract that they offer to Lamar by front loading it heavily laden with incentives and not incentives, but I suppose front-loaded money, front-loaded cash, guaranteed money, signing bonus, all of those things that makes it more difficult for a team strapped for guaranteed money that they can hand out, i.e. a team that just gave 15 million schmackaroonies of that type to Odell Beckham Jr. That's tough to match. And so you could totally see a team, if they were interested in getting Lamar, we're going to give him a big deal contract that the Ravens might be willing to accept and take on as their own on paper, but then you break down the terms of the deal that we offered, and would you look at that? They can't afford the first 2 years of the deal, so they have to say no. That could make a potential trade for Lamar really interesting. I guess what it comes down to here is, what are the motives of OBJ making this move? And JT, I'm curious if you have an opinion on this yet. I don't know. I think every talk show in the nation is going to dissect it until it is fully covered from every angle this week. What is OBJ signing here for? Is it the fact that they offered him, I don't know, an absurd $18 million 1-year contract that he wasn't getting anywhere near anywhere else in terms of offers? I don't know that, but I'm almost positive no one else was offering him that kind of money. Maybe he's just chasing the bag. Very possible. Receivers, we see it happen. Or maybe he's going, and it's only because he thinks Lamar Jackson's going to be there. He has reason to believe that, and he's still ring chasing. But this is the guy that left Cleveland and went to the Rams. I mean, they paid him well, but it wasn't for the money. It was because he wanted to go win a ring, and he did. He was a big part of the reason why they won that ring. Is he no longer in ring chasing mode, or is this still ring chasing? And if so, that means that he must know, or must think he knows, that Lamar Jackson is back. It's an interesting question.
I think also from a Ravens standpoint, it might be an indication that they would rather pay for a bona fide, or what used to be a bona fide stud in OBJ over this potential wide receiver draft class. Maybe that's what they decided. If Lamar is indeed coming back, they'd rather take a gamble on Lamar than take a gamble on these smaller wide receivers.
Which is kind of a bummer, because I wanted to continue to mock Jordan Addison to them, because I don't think he's very good, and he's small, and he's exactly the kind of guy that the Ravens would draft. But I guess I won't anymore, because they won't be doing that. All right, we can move on.
Let's move on to the current Titans cap situation here. So, of course, with Corey Levin signing a 1-year, $1.08 million deal, and then Trayvon Wesco signing a 1-year, $1.2 million deal. Let's look at where the Titans currently stand. So, with top 51 cap space, they have $6,619,603. The cap space needed for draft picks is $4.055 million, which means their cash payroll rank is 31st in the league.
Yeah, these are all numbers courtesy of the calculations of our guy, Zacch Lyons, over at Football and Other F Words, at F Words Pod on Twitter. He does a great job. He's kind of our go-to guru when it comes to specific numbers in the offseason. When I guess the business of contracts and all of that, he's very, very talented with those things. So we lean on him for that. Appreciate him. You're going to see different numbers like that all over the place. That's why I think it's important to say where we're getting it from. In terms of trusting the numbers for the Titans, I truly do trust him as much, if not more, than I do the OTC or the Spoke Track numbers, because those bigger companies have to wrangle these numbers and they're sometimes not up to date. They're also oftentimes estimations that Zacch gets more detailed on. For example, if you go look at those sites and try to figure out how much money the Titans need in cap space to sign their draft class, the numbers they give you are, from what I've seen, significantly larger than what Zacch believes they need. And he's got the work to prove, to show the math that he's done on why that's what they need. I think that it really is roughly $4 million right now that they need for those draft picks. None of those deals are bank breaking. Obviously, they have just short of $7 million in cap. They can make more. We've talked about this. There's another deal coming. You know that there is, whether it's Byard making some more room, whether it's Henry making some more room, whether it's Tannehill making some more room. There are players on the roster that they can manipulate. They could not drop or cut or trade. They could do those things to make some room, but I'm expecting them to manipulate those contracts while the players remain on the teams to make some more space, because they have to have some more space if they're going to add any more talent, and they have to add some more talent. So it's coming eventually.
Next up here, the Titans RFA Aaron Brewer finally signed his 1-year tender worth $4.3 million. This does bring up the important point here, though, that he still is able to sign an offer sheet with another team. So he's not technically on the team, but he does have until April 21st to sign an offer sheet somewhere else. We'll have to see. My money is on him being a Titan.
Yeah, that's a lot of money for Aaron Brewer, who, by the way, for $4.3 million on his 1-year tender, congratulations. Well, I'd like to introduce you Titans fans to your new starting center. That is absolutely who he will be. We're expecting him and Corey Levin, to probably battle out in camp for that, but Levin is making just north of $1 million on a 1-year contract. Brewer is making almost $4.5 million on a 1-year contract. He's going to be the preference for the job. I think he's going to get the job. And I think he's got the potential to be pretty good at the job, even though people have grown to hate him in his the complicity that he had in the abomination of the left side of the line last year at the guard position. He's not built to be a guard. He never really was built to be a guard. He's certainly not built to be a guard that has to play alongside Dennis Daly. There's no way he can carry his weight. He needs somebody else to carry a little bit of extra weight for him. And Dennis Daly ain't carrying anything but the jock straps of the people running around him every single snap. I will say this. Like JT said, don't expect him to sign it anywhere else. I think that this significantly lowers the Titans' odds of going after a guy that is projected to be a potential center. I don't think they were going after a center explicitly in the draft anyways. We've talked about how they're trying to key in on versatile guys. They like to have guys that are like more interior or more exterior linemen, or at least that seems to be the case with Rand and Vrabel. Let's get guys that can shuffle around. It's not a guy that, whoa, he has to play center. He has to play left guard. The only guy in this draft near the top in terms of talent for interior linemen that people are saying that guy's a center is John Michael Schmitz out of Minnesota, who's a very good player and I think would be very good on any team. He'd be good for the Titans. I think that if you are hoping for a John Michael Schmitz appearance in Tennessee, this lowers those odds, although he could, I guess, play guard as well. But that's the only other thing from this that I think you can take away besides the fact that Aaron Brewer is your new center. So congratulations.
We had a couple of Titans who got new numbers that they will be wearing next season. Start off with Sean Murphy-Bunting, who will be taking that most coveted new number 0 for the Titans. Azeez Al-Shaair will be wearing number 2. Arden Key wearing number 49. Luke Gifford, number 57. Daniel Brunskill, number 60. Andre Dillard, number 71. John LeGlue wearing number 72. Tyler Shelvin also wearing number 72, so it's going to be a battle for those two.
Somebody's got to go, baby.
Justin Rigg, 83, and Trayvon Wesco, number 88.
Don't care about any of this besides Sean Murphy-Bunting being your first 0 ever as a Titan. So there you go. It's a good number for a corner, I think. I like it.
Finally, an interesting player to come out of the XFL from this past week is Hakeem Butler.
To come out of the XFL. I think he's going to.
Who scored a touchdown this past weekend for the St. Louis Battlehawks. That's 6 receiving touchdowns for him this season. Could be an interesting NFL team pickup for a camp this upcoming summer. Butler was a Cardinals 4th-round pick in 2019.
Yeah, this is a random, not really big in the news at all, but it's a thing that I wanted to bring up. Pay attention to the XFL. I think there's some skill position players in the XFL and some defenders and maybe some special teams aces that are going to come from the XFL and have, we saw it a little bit with some of the spring leagues already, guys coming into the NFL. I forget who the guy for Dallas, their punt returner is, but he was, I think, the MVP of the USFL and then got a gig as the punt returner for the Cowboys. And I think he got award nods this year for being a special teams ace returner. Hakeem Butler is one of these guys that I think could make his exit from the minor leagues up to the big leagues. And as soon as this summer, he's a guy who is now on his 6th receiving touchdown for the season in the XFL. I don't know how many games they've played. I know it's not more than 5 or 6. So that's very good. He's the kind of guy, when you look up at his numbers, you wonder, how did he get bounced from the NFL? His measurables, some of the most impressive I've seen for a receiver in a long time. And maybe it's because we've been looking at this wide receiver class of shrimps for too long, and it's just like an oasis in the desert. A big-bodied receiver. But 6'5" and 3/8 inches tall, 97th percentile height, 95th percentile weight, 98th percentile wingspan, 99th percentile arm length, 98th percentile hand size, 63rd percentile 40, so a 4.48 second 40-yard dash, plenty fast. Like, this dude's got the traits, and he's excelling at the lower level. So at the very least, bring him in to be a body in your training camp, in your August camp, in your preseason games. Like, a team that needs receivers and could really use one that they find as a diamond in the rough for cheap. I don't know, the Titans, for example. This is the kind of guy you should bring in for at least being a body in the preseason process. All right, that's it for non-draft talk today. That we did roughly 30 minutes on that. We're going to do roughly 30 minutes now on the top 10 defensive tackles in this draft. JT, you and I have our big boards. Let's pull those up. And I'm excited to talk about these guys. I'm excited, really. Here's an admission. I'm not unexcited by the defensive players in this draft by any means. I think there's a lot of studs. I think the Titans are going to come away with a couple of them. And I think that it's a talented group. I'm not saying the offense is way better than the defense by any means in this draft class. I am saying that as somebody that is a draft analyst and is doing so generally speaking, but also with a focus on the team that I cover, we've not paid attention to these defensive players much in the last 2 months or so as compared to how much we've paid attention to the offensive guys. And so going through these defenders, we're going to get the whole defense out of the way, all the defensive position groups out of the way this week, and then move on to the offensive guys. I think all we have left is edge and cornerback after today. It's been eye-opening to really do deep dives so that we know what we're talking about on these guys for the show. There's some really talented guys in this group. I think, generally speaking, we knew that the edge and the defensive line groups were stacked. They're deep. I think this is maybe even a better group than people are giving it credit for. I think that you could see, I'm looking at my top 10 list here, you could see 4 or 5 of these guys 5 years from now being bona fide NFL stars. I was impressed.
Alrighty, so let's go down our, I guess, 10 through number 6 for these players right now. Do you want to do that once again?
Yeah, well, let's mention our honorable mentions, and then we can go 5 and 5. I'm good with that for sure.
Yeah, so for my 2 honorable mentions, these are 2 guys that I thought they had good measurables, just kind of did not make my top 10. They're very close, though. Zacch Pickens out of South Carolina and Carl Brooks from Bowling Green.
Yeah, the 2 guys that I had left out, who, just for time, we're not going to talk about the details on these guys today. Neither of them, in my book, are even defensive tackles. When we get to we were talking about this before the show, JT, but when you get to the edge defensive tackle genre of player, it's kind of tricky, especially when you're going college to pros. There's a lot of projecting involved. Guys change positions. Guys are better suited to different positions, and different draft analysts see different guys playing at different positions in the NFL. So when I go and I try to watch the tape, try to learn from others in the draft space, look at others' notes, compare and contrast what I saw to what others saw, get some notes on stats and all these things, try to figure out where they are in the consensus board. You often run into guys that I'm like, wait a second, why is I'm looking at linemen. Why is this edge in here? Well, it's because folks consider them a lineman. So the 2 guys that I left off of my board that, depending on who you are and your knowledge of this draft, you might say, why in the world did they leave those 2 guys off the list entirely? They didn't even mention them. Well, it's because we're going to talk about them tomorrow. And spoiler, Tuesday's episode, Tuesday morning, you'll have the top 10 edges in this NFL class, which is a stacked group of players. These 2 players we'll mention tomorrow because and I think JT as well, because he's got them not on his list either. I consider them more as an edge, but they are kind of a tweener between the interior and exterior defensive line positions. So the 2 guys I had mentioned that I often saw mocked or draft scouted, reviewed as an interior guy are Keeanu White out of Georgia Tech and Adetomiwa Adebaware out of Northwestern. I've gotten better at saying that name, by the way. Those 2 guys we'll talk about tomorrow. So without further ado, JT, I'll just run down my the first 5 in my top 10, number 10 through 6. At number 10, I have Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. At 9, I have Zacch Pickens out of South Carolina, who you left just outside of your board. At number 8, I have defensive lineman Moro Ojomo out of Texas. At 7, Gervon Dexter out of Florida. And at 6, Siaki Ika out of Baylor. JT, who are your first 5 defensive tackles?
Yeah, so at number 10, I have Gervon Dexter. Number 9, Kobe Turner, a guy out of Wake Forest. Number 8, Tuli Tuipulotu. Number 7, Moro Ojomo. And number 6, we both have Siaki Ika at Baylor.
All right, so in terms of the order we can approach these, let's start with the 2 guys that we disagree on in this group most. You're higher on Tuipulotu out of USC than I am. I'm higher on, do you know if it's Gervon Dexter?
I do not.
Okay, because we said it differently. It's one of the 2, so say it however you want. I'm higher on Gervon Dexter than you are out of Florida. I'll give you the floor first, gentlemen first here. Tell me what it is you saw in Gervon Dexter, why you liked him, and then I can explain why I maybe liked him a little bit more.
Yeah, so I think mostly I put him at the bottom of my list because I think he is a lot more of a project than a lot of these other players. He's 3'10". He ran a 4.88 40, which puts him in the 91st percentile of a lot of players in this NFL Combine, but I just think he's more of a project. I watched a lot of his tape the past couple of days, and nothing really just stuck out to me. I thought he was he had his best year, I believe, last year, and then this past year didn't live up to the expectation that he kind of set for himself the previous year.
Right.
He looks more of a guy that needs to learn a little bit more technique and needs to maybe just going to take a little bit of time to adjust to the NFL level.
The thing that I liked about Gervon Dexter more than you, and he is, just for reference here, he's the defensive lineman 8 on the consensus board, the mock draft database consensus that takes all of the mocks in the internet draft community and finds the consensus that we reference often. He's the 8th guy there. He's my defensive lineman 7. He's JT's defensive lineman 10. He's the 73rd overall guy on the mock consensus board and a round 3 grade. I do think that a late to early 3rd round draft of Gervon Dexter is perfectly appropriate for him. You look at his measurables, he's a big bodied guy. His size is the #1 thing on the marquee for him. 6'5" and 3/4 inches is good for the 91st percentile, 82nd percentile weight at 310 pounds. This is a big boy that's going to play on the interior for sure. He's going to be nose to nose with guards and centers. Arm length leaves something to be desired. This is why he's not an edge rusher for sure. This guy's not the most versatile in the world by any means. 15th percentile arms, only 32 1/4 inches long. His speed is good, 4.88, 63rd percentile, 9th percentile, 10-yard split. You don't expect that to be awesome for interior guys. He's not got a ton of explosive ability. His 3-cone isn't very awesome either. His broad jump and vertical jump are fine, relatively at just below average. And then his bench press is lower, but that's not a big deal. It's really not that of a concern to me. With him, I'll just say this. You definitely are right. He had a better a better second year in college than his 3rd and final year. He had some inconsistencies game to game. His pass rush win rate is above average, 8.5%. His pass rush grade is lower, though. So generally speaking, he's not a great rusher. His run defense is above average. He's a good run stuffer. And at that size, that's what you expected him to be. 310-pound, almost 6'6" guy. He's going to be a big body to be in the way in the interior. So is he going to get after the quarterback a ton? No. But is he a guy that can be a big body, 2-down player, rotational guy that is going to block up those interior holes of the offensive line of your opponent? Yeah, absolutely he is. And I think that he's a guy that with the right group, I mean, his run stop rate is well above average in the elite area, 7.7% in his past year. So he's kind of a one-trick pony, run stopper, but I think he's very, very good at it. The next guy we'll talk about is the guy that I'm not as high on, but you're a little bit higher on. And that is my 10th overall defensive lineman, Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. He's the consensus defensive lineman 6, 62nd overall on the consensus big board, a round 2 grade. I think that early round 3 is more accurate for him, but that's kind of splitting hairs. He doesn't have a ton of measurables available to us. 6'3" and 1/4 inches tall, 51st percentile, 266 pounds, 25th percentile. So size-wise, a different player than Gervon Dexter is for sure. Arm length, 15th percentile. So just like Gervon, he's more an interior guy. Definitely not going to be coming around the edge, I don't think, for any team. But when you look at his college numbers, which I think are more reflective of the tape, which I've watched a little bit of in the past couple of days, 2 very, very solid years, the past 2 seasons. Played 3 years for USC. His PFF grade, if you care about that, for all 3 seasons, above 70. He was above 80 for his last 2 years, despite his size concerns and the measurables, which really are the thing that are keeping him down on these lists. He was really good at USC. Now, the talent that he's facing in the Pac-10, not the best, right? They're playing the Washington States, the Utahs, the Arizonas, the Californias, and the Colorados of the world. Not exactly SEC teams that he's going up against. Not SEC offensive linemen he's having to beat. And yet, elite across the board, according to PFF's grading. Pass rush grade, 81. Run defense grade, 75. Pass rush win rate, more than double Gervon Dexter, 19.1%. So this isn't a one-trick pony if you think that his tape tells us anything. In college, this dude did it all on the defensive line. It's just as a matter of his size is concerning. JT, besides his size, I guess you didn't really find a whole lot of concerns with him, and the size didn't concern you as much for him. Why is that? What did you like about Tuli Tuipulotu?
Yeah, I can agree with you. That's what stuck out to me as well about him. The thing that I really liked about him, though, is how versatile he is. That's kind of a common theme with a lot of my guys and why they might be higher on my board. He can play both interior and outside. Last year, he played both interior and outside, but mostly outside. He had 488 snaps on the outside tackle last year with a 19.1% pass rush win rate. So despite being a smaller guy, he was still able to get after the quarterback. Yeah. And he's consistently on the field. He put up a 733 snaps last year and still put up an 82.1. The year before that, he had 630 snaps and put up an 82.6 PFF grade. So he's versatile. He's consistent being on the field. The only thing that I really didn't like about him is that he had a 31.4% missed tackle rate last season, which is a huge red flag for me. I honestly would have had him maybe at my 6 or 5, but just because of that missed tackle rate, as we've talked about with the safeties and the linebackers, it's a big red flag when we're evaluating these guys. So that's why he was my number 8.
Yeah, it's an interesting conversation to be had because when you project from college to the NFL, both their tape and their traits are the things that you put into, those are the ingredients that you take into consideration when you're trying to guess what they'll be doing at the next level. This is, I think, two guys that are a great example of both are not long athletes. One is much bigger than the other in Gervon Dexter and Tuli Tuipulotu. And yet Tuli, based on his tape, based on his experience in college, it seems like he can play inside and outside. He has that versatility, which, by the way, very good vocab word use on your part, you Titans media member, you. He's got that versatility despite his size concerns, despite his length concerns. Gervon Dexter doesn't have size concerns. He does have length concerns. And I would argue he probably can't play on the outside. Why? Well, because his college coaches didn't seem to think he could either because he didn't line up out there. He was lining up inside. So could he potentially have versatility in the NFL? Could he be more of an outside guy? It's possible, but folks aren't projecting him to be that because of his lack of length and because he didn't do it in college. With Tuli, teams could delude themselves into thinking this guy, and I say delude because I don't think he's an outside player at the NFL level, but you could argue, hey, he did it in college. Let's have him do it here in the NFL. He can move inside and outside. It's kind of a give or take there. So I find that interesting. Let me run down what I found interesting about Zacch here. Zacch Pickens out of South Carolina. He's my defensive lineman 9, and I'll talk about him because he's the first guy out, it looks like, for you. I think he's your defensive tackle 11 based on your notes that I'm looking at. I thought that he was good enough to be in my top 10. I'm a little bit higher on him than you. He's the consensus defensive lineman 9. So I've got him right where seems like the zeitgeist has him. 121st overall prospect on the big board, a round 4 grade. I think a round 4 grade is accurate. I would take him at the end of the 3rd, but I think that he's more likely to go into that 3rd day. Look at his traits, relatively average across the board, except for one big difference that differentiates him from the two guys we've talked about so far. Zacch Pickens has got length, man. This guy's long. He is 6'3" and 5/8", which is middle of the road for the defensive lineman position. 291 pounds, middle of the road. His arm length, 34 and 3/8 inch arms, 82nd percentile arms. So certainly a guy that I think can play on both the inside and the outside, but we shall see. But when you look at his numbers from college, this is a guy that I think backs up his projection from a traits standpoint with his numbers on the field. 11.5% pass rush win rate, an adequate pass rusher. Improved year on year from the past 2 seasons. Improved his number of snaps, took on a bigger workload in college, had kind of an up and down year, game to game, not a whole lot of consistency. He's got to work on that. He's got an above average run stop rate of 6.2%. He was graded relatively low as a run defender. So he's more the pass rush type, not shocking given his size and his profile. He is a senior, so he's a little bit on the older side. I don't have a whole lot to say about him besides he just feels like one of the safest rotational borderline starter guys in this draft who I think is worthy of a top 10 slot. If you don't have anything else to say on him, if you said your piece on Zacch Pickens, we can move on to a guy that I think is the first interesting one we have on the board here, a guy that you and I both, and I'm mad that we're both higher on him than consensus because I thought I was cool. This still is one of my guys in this class in the defensive line position because I think he's better than folks are letting on, but apparently you do too, and that's Moro Ojomo. Is it Ojomo? Let's see, Ojomo out of Texas. See, some of these guys I actually have a pronunciation guide on. He is the consensus defensive lineman 14 on the big board. He is my defensive lineman 8th. JT, he is your defensive lineman 7. He is the 132nd overall player on the big board with a round 4 grade. I would draft this guy anywhere in the 3rd round in a heartbeat. I really, really like him. I'll let you go first, JT. Let me know what it is you saw in Moro Ojomo.
Well, I think it just comes down to his production. This past year, I'm surprised with his production in his senior year that he wasn't kind of up on these boards a lot more. I think when it comes down to it, it's really just his size that has everybody scared. He had a 17.8% pass rush win rate last year. And at the combine, he tested really well. He really was an all-around average guy, which with some of these guys, you know, with their measurables and more so the drills and things they had to do at the combine, sometimes they didn't perform. With him, he performed very well in a lot of his things. He had a 5.0440, which is the 61st percentile. He's got good arm length with 34.5-inch arms, which is the 88th percentile. And with his vertical and broad jump, he was both 88th and 86th percentile, respectively. I think a lot of people are just down on him because he's smaller. He's got a height of 6'2.5", which is 34, and he's 292 pounds in the 17th percentile. And when I was watching his tape, this guy is a monster. He's got the ability to beat you. He's just smaller.
Yeah, it's the tape that I wanted to talk about, and I'm glad that you watched a bit of it as well. I probably watched more tape on Moro Ojomo out of anybody in this group of defensive linemen. I kind of just got sucked in and watched probably twice as much as I did on any of these other guys. I like his game a lot, and I think his measurables back it up. You mentioned a lot of them, but his size, not the tallest in the world, perfectly decent weight. At nearly 300 pounds. He's a longer player, north of that 34-inch arm benchmark for a lot of guys, 85th percentile for length. So like you said, he's a guy that I think is going to have some versatility. Where he wins, in my opinion, is the run game. It is like textbook all the time. It's like teach tape. I really, really like it. His hands, his hips, everything. Everything fires in unison, and he's well within his body, a connected player. His technique is very well developed. I think further along than most of these other guys. So yes, he's a bit undersized rather. But I think that if you're wondering why he's graded where he is, despite having really good tape, it's because of his size, not his ability. He's going to be a 3-4 defensive end kind of guy. If you're somebody that pays attention to schemes, he can be a difference maker, I think, as a gapper, as well as a guy that can be head up over the tackles. I don't think he's really a guy that's going to come flying around the edge a ton, but he can play more on the outside there. That's something that is gaining a lot of importance. This is if you happen to read the PFF profile on him, I'm not copywriting. I'm going to give them credit for this part, but I ripped it exactly because I think it's a really important point when I was reading their profile on him. A guy that can play both inside and also kind of like some of the players the Titans have on the defensive line with that versatility, that can also play a head up on the tackle. That's becoming more and more important in today's NFL as light boxes in the NFL continue to be more and more prevalent as teams try to get home with less players, guys that can move in and outside and can stay on the field for a series and play multiple positions and not have to bring new bodies on and off. That's valuable to NFL teams for sure. It's his pass rush ability that leaves something to be desired. He's just not got a whole lot of tools in the toolbox when it comes to his pass rush. He is an athletic guy. I mean, we've run down his numbers in the percentiles. His RAS is 9.14. So certainly a freaky athlete, generally speaking. But his bull rush is the only thing really that is effective on tape that I saw. He doesn't have many counters beyond that. So he's a guy that doesn't have a whole lot of tools to get to the quarterback, which is the number one thing that people value on the defensive line. And yet, I think that he's somebody that a team could see and say, we can teach that guy more than a bull rush. We think he's got it. He could be a starter 3-down guy in the league for sure. Who do we have left here, JT? Let me take a look at the board.
We have number 6 here, Siaki Ika, which we both have out of Baylor at the number 6 on both of our top 10s here. He's a really interesting prospect to me.
Yeah, let's talk about him before we move to the top 5. You're right. We have them both at 6. How about that? Let me know what you thought about Siaki Ika. He's a guy that me personally coming into this, he was not one of the 10 guys that I initially had on my rough draft. And then I dug into him and was really impressed.
I had my eye on him a little bit just because he's big.
He is big.
He's very, very big.
Have you looked at his mock draftable web? Because it's one of the funnier ones you've
yes,
I've the strangest shape.
I've seen a little bit of it. He's 6'3", 335, and he ran a 5.39, which for a guy who weighs 335 pounds, I thought was pretty impressive.
I mean, for reference, that's well over 100 pounds more than me, and I run roughly a 5.39. So,
when I was watching his tape, the guy that really came to mind for me is Bengals interior lineman DJ Reader. I think he's a big dude who sheds blocks like he's 40 pounds lighter than he is. He was able to get around guys, kind of just bull rush. There was a couple Texas clips where he was just getting to the quarterback by just kind of, classic blindside clip where he takes him all the way to the bus. He took a guy all the way to the quarterback. Yep. And on the same drive, he was knocking down passes in midair. Like, this guy can do it all. And he looks like he's 40 pounds lighter than he is, which is why he just is right outside my top 5.
This guy's a massive interior brawler. That's the best way to describe him. He's got play wrecking ability. I agree with you. I think that and I know exactly which rep you're talking about because it's on every highlight tape of his that's out there. He's got some really impressive tape out there. Like I mentioned, his measurable is super weird. You already brought this up. 335 pounds. He doesn't look it. I agree with you. He does not look like that big, but that's 96th percentile for interior defensive lineman. He's huge. 6'3 and a quarter, obviously very tall to go along with that. His arm length is 17th percentile, 32 and 3/8. So I don't see him really as an interior guy in the NFL, but who cares with that size, right? Like if you're talking about, I need a body on the inside to block up the run lanes, this is the body you need because no one's running through this 6'3", 335-pound mountain of a man. His 10-yard split, I only bring up because it's very funny. He's in the 1th percentile. I don't even know if 1th is a word. I think it's probably not the 1st percentile. That's what it is. It's the 1st percentile, but we'll say the 1th percentile. He's a 2th percentile 40-yard dash guy at 5.39, which I think is still relatively impressive for his size. The reason why I think he could rise up boards, and he's already risen up a little bit, but the reason he may continue to rise is just the mountainous size he has to combine with that power as an interior guy. He is not a versatile player. NFL front offices are not looking at this guy as somebody that they want to bring in and test around different positions in different looks. You know exactly what you're going to get Ika for. There's one thing that you bring in Siaki Ika for, and that is to be a body in the run game. His role is a nose tackle. Absolutely. Obvious. There's really no explanation there. He wins with his strength. His lower body strength is very, very nice. If he were to fall in the draft, he's just lacking in terms of being anything else but a run stopper. Not the best tackler. Can really only be viewed as a 2-down, early down guy, as a run plugger. So you don't have him in when you're trying to get after the quarterback. And he's struggled to be that every down player in college. He tried a good bit from what I read, and it just didn't really work out. So that's why his limited ability in terms of how often he can be on the field in a game, that's the reason why he's not quite in my top 10 defensive linemen in this class. JT, I'm looking at our top 5 here, and we've got, we'll try to get through them in the next 15 minutes or so because we're up against it with time. Let's first talk about, let's kind of break it up in halves here. In 5 through 3, we share 2 players. So let's talk about those 2. My 5th, 4th, and 3rd players are Bryan Bresee, Calijah Cancey, Bryan Bresee out of Clemson, Calijah Cancey out of Pittsburgh, and my defensive lineman 3 is Keeanu Benton out of Wisconsin. Your next 3 are defensive lineman 5, Keeanu Benton, Clemson defensive lineman 4, Bryan Bresee, and Michigan defensive lineman 3, Mazi Smith. Let's talk about the 2 we have in common, Keeanu Benton and Bryan Bresee. What did you like about Keeanu Benton? He's somebody that I'm higher than most on. Let's see, on the consensus board, he is the consensus defensive lineman 5, so right where you have him, the 57th overall player, a round 2 grade. I think that round 2 is absolutely where this guy's going to go. What did you like about Keeanu Benton?
I just liked how he truly is a pass rush specialist. Like this guy, he's able to stuff the run, but where he really excelled, especially on tape and also at the combine, was his pass rush ability. He's got a 13.3% pass rush win rate and an 80 percentile 3 cone, which out of the top 5 here, he basically wasn't higher on my board, mostly because of what the other 4 guys have done or what I think they can do.
Right.
But there, no doubt in my mind that this guy is a round 2 guy. He's going to be a plug and play starter for whoever drafts him. And if you're looking for a guy who's going to be able to get to the quarterback and be a lockdown pass rusher, he's a perfect fit.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's the 3rd best defensive lineman in this class for my money. I am a little bit higher on him. His measurables are good. They're above average. They're nothing to sniff at, right? He's north of 300 pounds. So he's a big body guy, 81st percentile for weight, 6'3" and 5/8 inches tall, 53rd percentile, perfectly good. He's got the length that you're looking for a more versatile guy. Almost just an 1/8 of an inch shy of 34-inch arms is good for 68th percentile arm length. And then he's got decent speed, but well, that's a lie. Just kidding. I had it in my head he had decent speed, and now I'm looking at it. He has below average speed. He ran a 5.08 second 40-yard dash, but he's north of 300 pounds, so not all that shocking. He does have decent explosiveness. His broad jump and 3-cone drill, both north of 50%. Where he wins is his hand placement. And I watched a good bit of his tape as well because I was trying to really get down. I'm sensing the common thread. The 2 guys I was higher on here are Keeanu Benton and Ojomo, and they're the 2 guys I watched the most tape on. Maybe it's because I know that I'm different on them, and I want to make sure that I can back up my opinion. But he's got great hands, man. Very strong, very violent with his hands. He wins on tape constantly. He's almost exclusively working inside in the tape that I saw, but he certainly has the ability to move outside. I saw him do a couple of reps on the outside. He's a below average run defender, but he's a very, very, very good pass rusher. Like you mentioned, this is, for my money, outside of the number 1 guy who I won't mention, it's Jalen Carter. He's the number 1 guy in terms of pass rush in this group for my money, at least based on what we saw in college. Now, some of these other guys, you could project a higher ceiling for them from a traits perspective. And I think some of them weren't utilized in the way that Benton was utilized in Wisconsin. He was assigned more rushing assignments than other guys. I mean, than a guy like Jalen Carter would be, for example, at Georgia, where they don't need him to rush the quarterback. He split his time between the A and the B gaps. And yeah, I did have to go look that up at PFF because that's not really my game to get into the nitty gritty, but roughly 650-ish snaps at each of those 2 gaps, both interior. You should know that's right over the center or over one of the guards. He can easily fill the same role, I think, in the NFL. And I think he does have that athleticism to, in a pinch or on occasion, be played as an outside guy. Maybe you're running a really light box, just a 3-man front. You could slide him over a tackle, between a tackle and a guard. Absolutely, you could. You could even line him up with one hand in the dirt on the edge. I think he plays. If I had to give him something to improve on, he plays relatively tight at times. His pad level is low, but his hands get too low when his pad level is low, and he kind of bottoms out a little bit. those reps are kind of few and far between, and he's a big fella, so that happens. But I think that this guy has potential from both a tape and a traits perspective to be a really good player. Really, the number one thing I saw from him analyzing his performance in college was some real inconsistency, especially against some of the top talent, which I get is concerning. You know, he didn't do great against the Hawkeyes. He didn't do great against Ohio State, but they're good teams with good players. So I think that's understandable. JT, who's the next guy we have to talk about here?
Let's talk about probably the most polarizing guy in Bryan Bresee.
That's all you had to mention. Yeah, Bryan Bresee. You want to start on Bryan Bresee? Polarizing is the right way to describe him.
So I have him as my number 4. You have him at number 5.
Yep.
I think still has the potential to go in the first round, just because basically my big thing with him is that
he's just not to interrupt you, but he is the 28th overall guy on the consensus board. So he is a round 1 grade according to the consensus. He's the defensive lineman 3 on the big board. But I think you and I both think that he's more a second round guy than a first.
Yeah, I mean, I could see like he seems like a perfect New Orleans Saint in my mind. Like that's just where
I think that. Yeah, no, I think that's I think that's a great
that
fit,
could be where he goes at number 29 there. I think.
And the Saints are a team that love to make weird draft decisions. So I can
really
see them reach on him in the first.
He could be finally their replacement for Trey Hendrickson and be that little project that they do need. People are down on him because he did have that down year and it wasn't as strong as the expectation, but he was also coming off that ACL tear. So I'm willing to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that.
We have to mention, I mean, personal family tragedy makes his evaluation so difficult. So difficult.
But I'm not willing to take him out of my top 5 because I think even if he is maybe a 1-year project, you know, I think he has the traits and the ability and has shown it in flashes to be a late first, early second round pick.
Yeah, I agree. When you look at his measurables, like this guy brings to the table on paper everything you're looking for. 91st percentile height, 6'5", almost 6'6", 298 pounds. So he's practically a 300-pounder, 64th percentile. He's got shorter arms, so he's an interior guy for sure. There's no doubt about that. But his explosiveness and his speed is really where he wins in comparison of those two categories. He's got a 4.86 40-yard dash for a guy that's almost 300 pounds. It's very good. That's 67th percentile. And he's got a roughly middle-of-the-road 10-yard split, so he's got some explosiveness too. His vertical was lower than most, 27th percentile. If he were to rise up boards, and he continues to fall down boards, so I don't expect this to happen, but if he were to rise, it's because this is a guy who, coming out of high school, I think was a number 1 over. I'm trying to see if it's written here anywhere. I don't have it written down. I think he was a number 1 prospect. He definitely was the number 1 interior defensive lineman prospect out of high school. In college, last year, during the draft process, during the offseason of college football, they were talking about this guy as a bona fide top 10 pick when he's eligible for the draft this year. And then he had a really tough year. When you look at his PFF grades throughout the year, or throughout his years, rather, they improved year on year very marginally from 2020 to 21 to 22. So he technically did better overall in 2022 than 2021. But on tape, there's a couple of games from this past season. The Furman, Syracuse, North Carolina, and Tennessee games really are padding his stats because he had some tough games on tape. JT, I don't know if you watched any of the Florida State game on tape from him, but like if you compare his opening game of the season against Georgia Tech in Atlanta as compared to that Florida State tape, it's tough, man. It's a tough scene. Now, I did mention personal family tragedy. His younger sister died during the season, tragically. So that that's really difficult to make a fair evaluation on him because he's a college kid. He's going through a horrible thing in the middle of a football season. How do you handle that? It's really impossible to know. He's relatively versatile from what I saw on tape and how I saw people projecting him to the NFL, I guess. He's more capable of playing outside than I thought he would be when I first looked at some of his numbers. He doesn't quite have the length, but his play strength kind of closes the gap there, allows him to execute any role, at least that he was asked to play in college. Ideally, you don't want him going up head on against offensive tackles if it's not a necessity, but I think he's actually capable of it. He's not the most creative guy. That's the common thread that I've seen a lot of defensive line gurus mention for him. his tape is a broken record. Like, it's the same things over and over. When he wins, it's often the same thing. And when he loses, it's often the same thing. He doesn't try a whole lot of different things. So like his bag, he stays firmly within the walls of his bag, is not often adding new things to his bag. He needs to do that. And with NFL development, you'd imagine he will. But his play strength, his versatility because of that play strength, and his length that is bad, but I guess just good enough to be good enough to work as a guy on the outside that can't affect the quarterback. That's going to be what teams bite on him for, and that's the reason why he might end up going in the first round. He did never really post impressive sack numbers in college at all. His 3 seasons, he had 4, 1, and 3 total sacks with 6, 3, and 4 quarterback hits. So can he get after the quarterback? Yeah. I mean, he had 17 and 16 quarterback hurries in 2 of his 3 college seasons, but is he going to be a guy that can reliably do that? No. And that's why I have him at my 5th position. You have Mazi Smith out of Michigan at the number 3 spot. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I have him he's my defensive lineman 2 in this class. Let's talk about him and then Calijah Kancey, who's your number 2. What did you like about Mazi Smith? What did you maybe not like as much as I did?
So he was a guy that is very much just kind of new on my radar for him to be number 3. There was definitely a lot of guys in the past week or so that I had above him, but as I really started diving into it, he's just going to be an amazing run stuffer. I think he maybe is one of the top run stuffers in the class. He still had a decent pass rush win rate at 11.4, but not the best. But the dude is just really strong. He's built to be an interior guy. And if you want a premier pass or run stuffer in the draft, he's going to be one of your guys.
Yeah, absolutely. He's the consensus defensive lineman 4. He is JT's 3. He is my 2. He's the 30th overall player on the consensus big board, a round 1 grade. I think that he's a guy that if a defensive lineman comes off the board in the first round, not named Calijah Kancey or Jalen Carter, a lot of people are going to think that person is Bryan Bresee. I think that person should be Mazi Smith out of Michigan. I think that he's the 3rd guy worth potentially a first round pick. Ultimately, I think he may be available on day 2, not really pertinent to the Titans' needs, but pertinent to a lot of teams' needs. This guy's wide-bodied, also a bruiser, interior lineman. He's got very high-end athletic traits. His height, 26th percentile, 6'2" 3/4 inches. 323-pound weight, though. And at 323 pounds, he doesn't have a recorded 40 time or splits because he didn't run those in this offseason. But on tape, his play speed is impressive at that size. I thought that of all the 320-pound plus guys that I watched, except, again, potentially Jalen Carter's not actually north of 320. I was wrong. So, yeah, of all the 320-plus boys, I thought that Mazi Smith was the most impressive. He's very, very athletic, big guy, plays with considerable power, always active with his hands. The small thing that I'm most attracted to in defensive interior guys is what their hand placement is like and how they utilize their hand placement to their advantage. Because at the NFL level, it's that kind of thing that is what wins you reps on the inside in particular as a defender. His role is definitely as a nose tackle. There's no doubt about that. He's another one of these guys that is a true hold the point nose tackle. He won't be much more than that. He's going to be a pocket pusher in the passing game. He's not going to really get after the quarterback. He has the strength to push the pocket, though, so I expect him to do that regularly in the NFL. He plays a little bit too upright at times, gets knocked down off the ball. He may be an only early down guy in the NFL, especially at first. I think that's how teams will utilize him. But he, I think, ultimately has the ability to be an every down guy and not just an early down guy. His hands are good enough that I think he could work on his pass rush ability and get a little bit better at that. But even if he doesn't, he is the ultimate. If you're looking for a body to be a run stuffer in this draft, he is the number 1 guy for me in this class. So that's why Mazi Smith out of Michigan is my defensive lineman 2. Now, your defensive lineman 2 is a guy that at the combine was among probably the top 5 most impressive combine performances. That's Calijah Kancey, who's being comped to not a former teammate of his, but a fellow alma mater,
alumni.
A fellow alumni. That's the word I'm looking for. Fellow alumni out of Pitt University. up in Pennsylvania, a little guy named Aaron Donald, who's done very well in the NFL. These guys, scary, similar body type, scary, similar athleticism, scary, similar game. But Aaron Donald was a kind of a tweener coming out. He's proven to be the ultimate exception to that rule. Clearly, you think that he can be an exception to that rule, Calijah Kancey.
He's a guy that it's very interesting when we talk about our cornerbacks later in
this
the
week,
next week or so,
yeah,
whenever that is. Whereas like in 2022, Devin Witherspoon like shot up boards and is like the cornerback #1 consensus now, and I'm not totally buying that. With Calijah Kancey, like he was like 2022 blew up and like at the combine like wowed, and now I'm like totally in awe of him. Like
you are drinking the Kool-Aid on Calijah Kancey.
I am a hypocrite of my own design here, but I am.
It's all right.
The dude was just insane. Like if you look at his the tape is absolutely crazy, and like you can't even really say anything about his size because he doesn't win with his size. He has great technique. He's going to be a 3 technique guy in the league. He's got amazing twitch and versatility with his move set. Like the dude is going to be a stud plug and play guy from the get go, and he's going to go in the top 20.
Yeah, I love that you bring up he doesn't win with the size, like it's a surprising thing. I know that you know it's not, because this dude is a first percentile height and first percentile arm length guy. So length ain't it with this guy. This guy does not have length. Concerning lack of size. But what he is a total firecracker of a pass rusher. He's explosive. His first step with his hands, everything about his game. Just, I kept thinking, I'm trying to write down different descriptive words as I'm watching the tape. It's just, I keep coming back to explosive. 91st percentile 40-yard dash. Okay. 4.67 second 40-yard dash that you and I were sitting there watching in person and caught our attention at the time. I remember that much. An awesome 10-yard split, 72nd percentile at 1.64 seconds. His weight is perfectly fine, 44th percentile, 281 pounds. He can add some weight, can't add height, can't add length. And yet, despite his length, he's a really productive interior pass rusher from the inside. He's kind of a strange player. He's got the motor of an outside of an edge, and he's got the body type of really a tweener between the interior and the exterior, but more useful on the interior, at least in college. And it's an interesting comp to the NFL, because do you think teams are going to use him on the inside as an undersized player? I don't know. That's really, really light to be successful in the NFL. You have to be uniquely to the point of being a real outlier. You have to have a unique play strength and speed and power. And to his credit, it seems like he does. He is twitched up to the moon. He is wound up like a toy you find at Cracker Barrel, and he just runs and runs and runs like the Energizer Bunny out there, energizing or urgency with everything that he does. His hands and feet are extremely quick. He knows how to use both very well. He's a penetrating 3 technique defensive tackle. That is how he's going to be used in the NFL, almost certainly. I think that he's going to be a 3-down guy. Maybe not if his run stopping ability isn't impressive in the NFL. Maybe he's more a late down guy, but I think that he could be a 3-down guy. What he can improve at is playing under control. His size, his shortcomings, they're not going to go anywhere in that department, but he can get much better from a technique standpoint, and he can get much better at not being in a hurry all the time, so much so that sometimes he overcommits to things. Sometimes he gets ahead of himself. Sometimes he's got 2 left feet a little bit. That's not often, though. It's few and far between. Most of the time he's winning. He's just a tough comp, because against NFL, or a tough evaluation, JT, because when he gets to the NFL at that size, there's a lot of question marks. I mean, you go and you look, a lot of guys who are high on Calijah Kancey point to the tape and say, whoa, look at these 3 pass rush reps against Tennessee, for example, early in the fall last year. And yeah, they're amazing. He looks like a bona fide first-round pick. But then guys who aren't a fan of them will say, okay, now look at the other 37 reps that he has from this game. It's just a bunch of nothing. Like, inconsistent is the word I'd use most in terms of watching his tape. It is a lot of all or nothing. If teams can get all out of him, awesome. But these tweeners just scare me, because they either have to be an exception, size-wise, build-wise, or they end up being somebody that is just not built to play one position or the other. They're not best utilized at either, and sometimes that means they're not going to be utilized at all in the NFL, and they can't hang. He's the kind of guy that feels like the most boom bust in this class. Like if you told me 4 years from now he's the best defensive lineman in the class, he's literally like an Aaron Donald light, I'd believe you. If you told me he's just another tweener that couldn't hang at either position, he's not in the league anymore, I'd believe you, despite his athleticism. So he scares me. JT, I don't know if I would want to draft him because you're going out on a limb, but the high side is there, man. It is there.
I agree with you. It might be more of a situational thing. Like personally, the hot commodity to pick him is the Lions at 18. Like
yeah.
if you put him on that growing young core, I think he excels. But if you put him on a different line that might struggle a little bit more, like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or something like that, he might falter a little bit more. I think it's going to come down to where he goes.
I think fit with him, it's a great point, is more important than most. If he gets put on a team, I think versatility for where the team he goes is important as well, JT, because if he gets put on a team in which, they've got a guy like Siaki Ika, for example, just a big-bodied run stuffer on the inside that they compare with the polar opposite player style-wise in Calijah Cancey, and then you mix and match and you're throwing all kinds. I mean, your interior defensive line is literally a pitcher in Major League Baseball. You've got 7 different pitches you can throw, 13 different combinations. Like that kind of thing could be really nice. And if you get a really brilliant defensive coordinator, like put his hands on that kind of versatility, it could get nasty fast. But if he is the guy expected to be your bona fide stud gap penetrator on the inside, the size just might not be there. Let's move on to our last guy here, who the size is there. Take it home. I mean, this is one of probably 5 players in this draft as we go through the series. Like when we get to Bryce Young, when we get to CJ Stroud, when we get to Jahmyr Gibbs, when we get to who else? Anderson Jr. When we get to JSN, like there's a handful of these guys that you don't have. There's no necessary introduction. There are no needed introduction. There's not a whole lot of
real quick. You put Jahmyr Gibbs in that that group of people. Gibbs? Yeah.
You mean Bijan? I named? That's what I meant. Yeah, I meant Bijan.
I was like,
I said the wrong.
I like Jahmyr Gibbs, but like,
yeah, no. I mean Bijan Robinson. Thank you for that correction. It's the guy of the hour. It is the number one on some draft boards, the number one player in the entire draft. And on every single draft board you can find, he is the number one defensive lineman in this draft. If you find one where he's not, don't listen to the person that wrote that article ever again. He is Jalen Carter out of Georgia. I'll bring it home here, JT, and feel free to interrupt me with any input you might want to add, but I'm just going to go down the basics here. Not anything unique from me from a evaluation standpoint. He's the consensus defensive lineman 1. He's both of our defensive lineman 1s, the 5th overall player on the big board, round 1 grade. He would be a bona fide, for sure, top 5 pick without a shadow of a doubt. Put your mortgage on it. If he didn't have kind of a nightmare past month, JT, it's kind of surreal because you and I were there the morning that the news was breaking, and we were part of the posse of people in Indianapolis that day who were reporting it online at the time that Jalen Carter was not going to be coming out and speaking at the podium that we were all standing around at the time waiting for him to come out to. It was really at the last minute this came down. The warrant that came out for his arrest in Georgia and I'll be honest, I've not done a ton of digging on the story, but I know it's a speed racing thing. Somebody, a former teammate or a friend died. He was maybe complicit, maybe left the scene. I'm not going to go into the details because I don't want to besmirch anybody or say anything wrong about a legal case. I don't know. Go look it up. That being said, it seems like it's not the most concerning thing in the world because teams are still quite high on him. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, has been turning away teams interested in meeting with him who aren't inside the top 10 because he fully expects his client to go in the top 10. Bold choice. For his sake, maybe not a horrible thing that he falls a little bit because he'll go to a better team, one might imagine. His measurables, he brings everything to the table that you're looking for. His arm length, 33.5-inch arms. 57th percentile. He's got the flexibility to play inside or out, but with this guy, this talent, he's going to be playing inside for sure. 6'3 and 1/8 inches tall, 51st percentile, 314 pounds, 87th percentile. So a big bodied guy. If he rises any further than he currently is, which is a bona fide top 10 pick, it's going to be because his off-field issue concerns get cleared up and people are less concerned about them. Because from a player standpoint, there is nothing to be worried about, really. Like, the only things that I could find for negatives, JT, my negatives column in my book here is relatively empty, because all I could think of is he never really posted elite sack numbers. There's the off-field issues that may or may not actually be issues. Like, beyond that, I don't know. He's a versatile defensive tackle. His frame is fantastic. More of a 3 technique, but he's more than capable of lining up wherever you need him between the tackles, making plays. There's not a whole lot he can improve on. Again, it's just minor gripes and quibbles. He has the goods on the field for sure. Power, power, power. If I describe him with one word, that word is power. This guy is an interior penetrator. He combines a lot of different, bulldozer, power, spin moves. His hand placement's fantastic. His technique is very polished, best in this group. Very nimble feet, consistently just picking up and forklifting offensive linemen, wrecking pockets. He does it all. Pass rush, needing to be a body in the run game, needing to be a good tackler. Like, it all checks out with this guy. So wherever he goes, as long as he's not got off-field issues and is the kind of person that can succeed in the NFL, has the personality for it, has the drive for it, he might end up being the most talented guy out of this draft class. It's really all there is to say, JT. Do you have anything else to add to Jalen Carter besides I hope he's not a dirtbag off the field? That's the only thing you can hope for. Okay. Nope. And with that, those are our top 10 defensive tackles in the 2023 NFL draft. I don't think we've been doing this, but just for wrapping everything up with a bow, JT, if anybody who's listened wanted to go back and do their own research on some of these guys, here are our top 10 boards. JT's top 10 defensive linemen. Defensive lineman 10, Gervon Dexter out of Florida. Defensive lineman 9, Kobe Turner out of Wake Forest. 8, Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. 7, Moro Ojomo out of University of Texas. 6, Siaki Ika out of Baylor. 5, Keeanu Benton out of Wisconsin. 4, Bryan Bresee out of Clemson. 3, Mazi Smith out of Michigan. 2, Calijah Cancey out of Pitt. And 1, Jalen Carter out of Georgia. My top 10, defensive lineman 10 is also Tuli Tuipulotu out of USC. Number 9 is Zacch Pickens out of South Carolina. Number 8 is Moro Ojomo out of Texas. Number 7 is Gervon Dexter out of Florida. Number 6 is Siaki Ika out of Baylor. 5, Bryan Bresee out of Clemson. 4, Calijah Cancey out of Pittsburgh. 3, Keeanu Benton out of Wisconsin. 2, Mazi Smith out of Michigan. And 1, Jalen Carter out of Georgia. Those are our official top 10 defensive linemen in this year's NFL draft. And we are well out of time. So no more from me today, besides the fact that I need to remind you, every single day this week, we've got episodes coming out. We've got tomorrow on Tuesday morning, the top 10 edge rushers in this class will be coming out. JT and I are going to record that on Monday. Excited for that one already. My preliminary research tells me this group's even better than the defensive tackles, and I'm pretty sure that that is going to be JT's evaluation as well. This is I'd say one of the top 3 most stacked groups. Like, it is cornerbacks, maybe top 2. Like, it's cornerbacks, edges. Can you think of a group more stacked than cornerback? Or yeah, I think it's edge. It's either edge or tight end.
Maybe tight end would give them a run for their money.
Yeah, it's those 3 are the top 3. So this is the first true blue chip group of guys that I'm really excited to dive into. We've also got cornerbacks later this week. Hey, my mock draft 2.0 is an episode we'll be doing this week, either on Thursday or Friday. The article for that is going to come out. If you are looking for the article on the last one, we had some site issues where unfortunately the article got corrupted. I tried for days to post it. It didn't. No harm, no foul. It's a mock draft article. I didn't want to rewrite it because I'm going to write a mock draft 2.0. So this is me rewriting it as a 2.0. And I'm going to change a lot of things. So check out that and the article now that we can post articles on the site again, and we fixed the tech that was causing that issue. That will be out later this week. The mock draft 2.0 episode will be out later this week. I've got a lot of fun and tasty changes involving maybe a Jack Campbell in the first round. I don't know. We'll see. It could really excite some folks potentially who produce this show. A lot of exciting things coming down the turnpike. We've got a couple of guests. We'll be doing the offensive lineman later this week, JT. If you're a Titans fan, that should be appointment listening. This is the first of the offensive guys that we're going to be getting into, and our 2 guests are hand-picked offensive line experts, in my opinion, in JT's opinion, in the opinion of the Nashville media community. If you're a Titans fan, you're going to recognize these guys, and they are studs when it comes to talking about the big boys, big meaty men slapping meat on the interior. If that's a clue as to who one of these guests might be. Excited about those conversations, and we'll be getting into those as the tackles and the interior offensive linemen as 2 separate episodes. So make sure to check out those this week. And we have to, I think, go ahead and start, JT, just mentioning offhand, if you're already making plans for draft night, you quit making them. You've got plans. I'm about to tell you what they are. You're going to be watching our live stream, which we'll be doing, the details of which will be coming out officially in the next week or two, as we're still ironing out who's going to be there, what it's going to look like, the timing, all of these things. We're leveraging some guests to potentially join us for the full thing, some others to potentially phone in and join us for parts of the draft. We're for sure going to be doing a live stream during the entire first and second days of the draft. So night 1, when the first round comes off the board, and then night 2 for round 2 and 3, we'll be live for the entirety of those drafts. So tune in with us then. And we may even do day 3 if it's just that exciting and that popular. So make sure to tune in with us for those. That's it for today. We'll see you again every day this week. Excited to talk about more prospects in this draft, and just so excited for us to be at the finish line here. Super jacked to sprint all the way to the draft on April 27th. For producer JT, I'm your host, Easton Freeze. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll talk to you Tuesday morning. Until then, have a great Monday.